you feel like your window of opportunities now, strike while the iron's hot, so to speak.
You heard it from Doug Peterson himself. The Jaguars' window of opportunity is right now, even though it is officially closed for this season. Welcome into Teal, the show. I'm Jamal St. Cyr alongside Frank Frangie. Frank, this is our first postseason episode of Teal, the show. Jaguars' magical run through the year officially came to an end.
Yeah, it did, and we're all bummed out. You're bummed out when your team loses. But I can tell you, of all the times I've seen a team lose in a fan base, this group isn't down for very long. This was kind of came out of nowhere. At 3-7, nobody saw this coming, Jamal. And all of a sudden, bang, what a finish to the season. What an amazing finish. Got to the final 8 of the NFL and took maybe the best team in the league to the mat, took them to the wire, and lost in the end on a game that came down to an onside kick, really. And then all of a sudden, people were bummed for a while, but said, look, this is the sort of the end of the beginning, if you will. It's just started. And I think people know good times are ahead. So that's why I think people aren't quite as bummed as they might have been.
Yeah, this is just the start of something that could be a very fun run. This team could even make a solid argument that they're ahead of schedule with Doug Peterson leading this bunch. The big step this year is that even though it didn't end the way everyone wanted it to, the players got plenty of playoff experience.
It was a great experience. Having that home game here was really, really cool. Being able to win that game, and then obviously a great environment in Kansas City, and just kind of that hunger that's left after coming up short. I think everybody feels that, and really excited moving forward. And that's like we said after the game. What we said today is like we set a new standard, and that's kind of, we're not going to settle for anything less.
I kind of forgot that feeling. Like regular season is regular season, but in the playoffs, the games is a little different. Just the energy you go into there with, the mindset you go into there with. I feel like I miss that feeling. I love that feeling, and ready for next year so I can strive to get back there.
Well, Frank, with the season officially over, we kind of have to start peeking ahead to what's next for the Jaguars. And, of course, there are going to be some lofty expectations because in Doug Peterson's second year with the Eagles, he won a Super Bowl. That's a tough thing to repeat, but you got to feel pretty good about some of the young players the Jaguars have right now.
Well, there's no question. And look, you don't go as far as they did this year. Remember, they were the worst team in the league. They drafted first overall twice in a row. That means your team wasn't very good. And in 1 year, Doug's got them in the final 8. There's reason to be excited. And give Trent Baalke some credit. He built this roster. It's not perfect. There's some holes, but not a lot of them. It's a good roster and a great coach and a really good young quarterback. So there's a lot of reasons to be excited. But you're right. The one thing that changes, this was a season of no expectations, Jamal. Well, that's over. Starting next year, there will be high, lofty expectations for the Jaguars, and there should be. That's what you want when you're building a franchise.
Yeah, Doug Peterson knows that there are some lofty expectations. They officially have become the hunted now. Doug Peterson says he likes his core and thinks that they have the right pieces to be building toward hoisting that Lombardi trophy.
We're close. We're close. I think the leadership's right. I think the core guys that we have are right. Listen, it just boils down to just continuing to work hard, and just trusting in each other. There's consistency with the staff. There's consistency with the players. I mean, you look at some of these teams now that are still playing, and that's what they've had. Cincinnati right now they struggled early on, but these last couple of years they've turned that corner. Kansas City is the same way. You look at the Eagles, you look at the Niners. I mean, these are teams that have been established for a while, and these players have been around each other, and that's what it takes. It takes that continuity and consistency, and we're just kind of at the beginning phase of that.
Doug Peterson may like the core of this team, but overall the team won't be the same one that took the field this year when they take the field again next fall. Frank, a lot of questions in free agency. One of the big ones, tight end Evan Ingram. He signed a one-year prove-it deal, and boy, did he prove it.
Boy, Jamal, he really did. And I will tell you this, it won't be exactly the same, but I think the team's going to do all it can to make it very close to the same. I know they're going to try and re-sign Ingram, even if they have to franchise him. He'll be on the team next year. I know they really want to sign Juwan Taylor. He's had a great year. What a terrific right tackle he's been. I think they'd like to sign Arden Key, and a lot of the guys are under contract. So it might not be exactly the same, but it's going to be very similar. This will be a year, if they have their way, of very little change. And why would you change much? It's a great roster. There's great camaraderie in that locker room. I think the culture is good. And because of that, I think they connect with their fan base. So I wouldn't change very much, and I don't think they want, if they can help it, they don't want to change very much either.
Yeah, Evan Ingram has said multiple times that he'd like to stay here in Jacksonville. He was in a very somber mood as he cleaned out his locker today, and he said the closeness of this team is what makes the uncertainty of what's next so difficult for him.
That's the nature of the business. You know, the DNA of this team will never be the same that it was in the locker room the other night. You know, no matter what, it's going to be different pieces. It's going to be different. So, you know, this is a once in a lifetime, you know, team that was together in those moments. So, you know, it's we've come so far. We've grown so far together, and you know, those battles are won. You know, you can scheme, you can you know, draw up as many plays, you can prepare as much as you want, you know, on paper, but you know, those battles was won with the brotherhood of the team and the guys sticking together and coming together, and you know, those are bonds that you'll remember forever. So that's the toughest part, because you just know nothing's going to be the same, everything's going to be a little different, and you know, you just appreciate the guys, all the work, and you know, be present in the memories that you create together.
Evan Ingram not the only big free agent for the Jaguars. When Teal the Show returns, we'll talk about Jawan Taylor and some of the other moves the Jaguars could be looking at making this offseason. That's straight ahead when Teal the Show returns. Welcome back into Teal the Show, Frank. The offseason officially kicking off, and that means for once we have just the normal conversation of free agency. This feels like the first time in forever, Frank, that we aren't talking about a coaching surge. We're not talking about if they have the quarterback, who the quarterback's going to be. No controversy, just football. And you know what? I think I can get used to it.
Boy, I can too. In fact, I love where they are. Winning's better than losing, Jamal. I love the way people feel in the community. I love the fact, I don't care if you're the grocery store, you're walking the dog, you're at bars and restaurants. This team has elevated this community. They've galvanized this group, and I think that'll continue. That's the best part of this thing. This run has had some magic to it. It really has.
All right, Frank, part of this run has been some of the players that are actually going to get a chance to test free agency this year. The Jaguars have a handful of them. Who do you think will be back, and who do you think is probably gone for next year?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think Evan Ingram's back somehow, some way. They'd like to extend him, because if you can, then you can amortize the dollars rather than them all going into 1 year if you franchise him. But I think they will tag him if they have to. You can't not have Evan Ingram. I think he's going to be on the team. They really want Jawan Taylor back. He had a great year. He had one of the best years of anybody on the team. It's hard to find those tackles, so they're going to try. The problem is, if somebody offers him left tackle money, can the Jags in their cap situation afford him? But they're going to try. I can promise you that. I think Arden Key will be back somehow, some way. And look, I think I would bring back Andrew Wingard. He's not going to be expensive. He's part of that culture. He's part of the belief in that locker room. He connects with the fans. So I'm going to predict all four of those guys are back. Now, after that, it's going to get interesting. That means they probably can't bring in a lot of free agents from the outside. They've already got Calvin Ridley, obviously, but they can't bring in a lot of new faces. Most of the new faces then will probably come through the draft. But I think all four of those guys are going to come back. I'd be surprised if any of those guys are gone, Jamal.
Those are some big additions there, Frank. The only one name that I didn't hear you say that I was hoping you would is DeJuan Smoot. He's finished the year on injured reserve. He's been a big player for this team moving forward, or in the past, and I think they can't afford to lose any pass rush moving forward, because I think that's a big position of need this offseason already. If they could keep Smoot and Key, that would be big for the defense.
Yeah, Smoot was probably their best pass rusher before he got hurt.
Right.
Had he not got hurt, he certainly would be back. Now you got to manage or measure or monitor the injury. You got to see where that thing's going, and you got to base that against how much cash you've got against the cap. So because DeJuan got hurt, because you have so much cap space or only have so much cap space, and you've got to find pass rush, you got to keep an eye on that. I don't necessarily think he's not going to be back, Jamal, but I think in fairness to everybody, they've got to monitor the injury. He is a free agent. And let's see where that thing goes. I'd love to see him back, too. I love his energy. I love his mojo. I love everything about DeJuan. We'll have to see what happens.
All right, let's circle back to your here and gone list a little bit. You mentioned Jawan Taylor and Evan Ingram. I think Evan Ingram is priority number one, especially because right now they have no tight ends under contract besides Luke Farrell. So you have to at least get somebody. They need people with a pulse to help fill out the roster. I think keeping Evan Ingram, you've seen what he can do with Trevor Lawrence, is huge. To me, that's priority number one. Keeping Jawan Taylor is also a big deal. I think we asked Doug Peterson about it today, and he goes, well, do you like Trevor Lawrence? And you know, everybody's going to say yes. And he's saying, well, you want to keep him upright, and we'd like to see him healthy. And Jawan Taylor can help to do that. But if you keep Taylor and you paid Cam Robinson big bucks last year, what about Walker Little, who we saw have a pretty solid end to the year, Frank?
What we've seen this year, Jamal, is you need 3 of them. Because if you didn't have 3 of them, what would you be doing right now?
It's true.
It's taken 3 to get through this season. Depth is okay. And in a position as important as offensive tackle, when you've got a generational quarterback, a franchise quarterback, it's okay to have a 3rd guy. So I'm telling you, they're going to really try and keep him. Again, the challenge is if he gets left tackle money somewhere, how high can they go to match him? So he's going to be here. As for Evan Ingram, look, think about it. There's 4 teams left. George Kittle's still playing. Travis Kelce's still playing. Dallas Goedert's still playing. Hayden Hurst, the Jacksonville kid who's playing for Cincinnati, is still playing. When you have a really good pass-catching tight end, you go deep into the playoffs. It's not an accident that some of the best pass-catching tight ends are still playing, and I would put Evan Ingram in that group. You've got to have – they're hard to find, and when you have one and you've got one, you can't let him get away. I'm convinced Evan Ingram's going to be on the team.
Right, and even if they have to franchise tag him, which is a very reasonable contract at this point with tight ends being franchise tagged, you saw teams handing them out left and right last offseason. Don't be surprised if the Jaguars do that this offseason. All right, Frank, let's talk priorities here. If there's a place, obviously, with the scenario you just mentioned, Jaguars don't have a ton of money to spend in free agency, but there may be some to get some of those under-the-radar guys like they were able to land in Arden Key last year. If there are some places where you'd like to see them improve this roster outside of maybe tight end, because if you maintain Evan Ingram, that kind of takes that off the list, where would you like to see them go?
I think there's 2 things that jump off the page for me and then a couple secondary things. Number one, you got to improve your pass rush. They only had 35 sacks. The Philadelphia Eagles had 70. You've got to have more sacks. Saxonville had close to 50 a few years ago. You've got to have sacks. They don't have sacks. So you got to improve your edge. And I think you need another corner. Darius Williams played pretty well, but I'd love to see an elite corner opposite Tyson Campbell, who's becoming an elite corner. So the 2 areas for me are pass rush and edge and cornerback. After that, I think you need depth along the lines. I thought Kansas City won this kind of the street fight. I thought they were more physical than Jacksonville. Frankly, I thought Tennessee might have been a few weeks back. So get more physical on both defensive and offensive line. That's my secondary concern. My main thing is edge and a cover corner. I think those are the first 2 things, whether that's whatever free agent money you have left over, Jamal, whether you do that in the draft. I think those are areas of concern.
We didn't compare notes, but I think we're right there on the same page. You've got to get a better pass rush. They need a nickel corner to play that slot. Trey Herndon, who manned it this year, also a free agent that we didn't discuss earlier. You're right. The team definitely has to get stronger in the trenches. The big question mark for that pass rush is, how do you get that on a budget? Because those pass rushers typically come at a premium. One way is maybe shifting the scheme a little bit. We saw throughout the year, Frank, them kind of shift away from the 3-4 as much, maybe starting getting of a little bit more 4-3 looks. And people have talked about Trayvon Walker. Maybe he's more of defensive end than outside linebacker. Do you think maybe even in year 2 under Mike Caldwell, they see that shift? You get 1 year of that 3-4 and go right back to the 4-3?
I don't think you're going to see a big announcement. Hey, we're changing.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to see a release that says, hey, the Jags have announced they're changing their form, their structure, their scheme. But yeah, I think Trayvon's a hand on the ground guy. That's my opinion. I think that's when he's at his best. That's when he was at his best at Georgia, Jamal, and I think that's what he does best. So if it was up to me, I'd put his hand on the ground, and that probably means more 4-3 looks. But yeah, you can find your pass rush with what you have. You're going to draft a pass rusher probably. That'd be my guess. But yeah, I think Devin Lloyd can help them as a pass rusher, not just playing inside. And if Chad Muma plays inside more, I think you could see 33 outside some. I believe that. I do think you try and keep Arden Key. I think some of your young players have to play better, and I think they will add to the mix. But yeah, there's a lot of ways to create pass rush, but they've got to do a better job than they did this year, no question.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned some of the young players playing better, because the key to this team taking that next step and making it farther in the playoffs, or at the very least a return trip to the postseason, they have to have some improvement from young players. I know the second-year step for Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson's system is, of course, the key to everything. But outside of 16, what player do you think is the key that needs to take that biggest next step going into next year?
Well, if you're talking about guys taking big steps, it's the young guys. Trayvon Walker's got to take a gigantic step. He had 3.5 sacks this year. That's not good enough. He's got to have 6, 7, 8 sacks. Even if he's playing inside, he was the #1 pick in the draft. He's got to improve from a sack standpoint. I think Devin Lloyd has got to learn the position. At times he was very good. At times he had a difficult time covering tight ends. He got a lot better as the season went on, but I think he's got to get better. So those are the two guys that jump off the page. It's not about a player getting better, but I think they need to fortify their running back room, Jamal. You've got to have somebody, a bit more of a downhill runner, somebody to complement what Travis Etienne is. JaMychal Hasty's a nice back, but he's kind of the same thing as Travis Etienne. He's a speed guy who gets to the edge. You got to have a downhill runner. So I'd like to see him do that, and I'd like to see both Devin Lloyd and Trayvon Walker take the big step. Remember, they're first-round draft picks. Your first-round draft pick has to take a big step.
Yeah, Trayvon Walker, definitely a step forward from him would help the defense a lot. But I think Travis Etienne's kind of my guy. I'm watching that. I'd like to see him take a big step because this is really his first NFL offseason. Last year, he was rehabbing from the injury, and that doesn't mean he has time to improve his game. He's just trying to be ready to play come training camp. So I'd like to see Travis have a big offseason, take a big step going into next year. We've seen what he's kind of able to do already on the football field. Need to work on durability, of course, protecting the football, and find other ways to integrate himself into the offense. It should be interesting. We have one more Teal to show for the year planned, and it's going to be a good one as we kind of take you through the offseason and some of the steps that we see in mind. Frank, thanks for being here. Thank you at home for tuning in. Good night, and go Jags.